President Trump is standing tall against the Supreme Court after the High Court ruled against the legality of President Trump's tariffs in a 6-3 decision this morning. The majority ruled that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act the Trump administration used to justify his import duties, quote, does not authorize the president to impose tariffs, end quote, which included the sweeping tariffs Trump was levied on many countries over concerns related to drug trafficking and what he said was a high trade deficit. Okay, Daniel, I'm going to go to you first. I know this is like your favorite topic, right? Tariffs.
I love IEPA.
Yeah.
I believe that, actually.
The basic, I think, best way to talk about this case is it seems like for the court, the majority, it was a separation of powers issue. They said, they thought Congress is the one that should lay and collect taxes. The law itself doesn't use the word tariffs. If you're a textualist, that obviously is important. And that the president went too far here. My question to you, there was some interesting dissents. One was with Justice Thomas, and he mentioned the idea of the first Congress allowing the president the authority to negotiate, and even with the Indians, trade negotiations with the Indians. And so is there a concern, a national security concern, that the president should be able to yield this power when necessary?
Well, I think the Supreme Court wants the president to have enough economic powers that you can actually do a real negotiation. But what they didn't envision is saying, oh, it's a a long-standing trade deficit from many decades. That doesn't constitute a new economic emergency. If that's an emergency, then nothing is an emergency. So this is a kind of a blow against Trump, but it's also kind of too little too late, because if you look at the polls, most Americans aren't big fans of these tariffs, that you have all this money pouring into this country. But a lot of that is promises. It's not, we haven't seen as many shovels in the ground from all the countries that we have made deals with.
The record revenue, you got $124 billion as a result of the tariffs so far.
And 90%,
that is real money.
But 90% of that money, according to the New York Fed, is coming from consumers. So consumers are paying these tariffs.
They've been gaslighting.
I want to get you in here because he mentioned a poll. So, I cover the Supreme Court. I was inundated with emails. There was a YouGov poll that came out, I guess, like right around the time of the opinion, and it said 60% approve of the decision. So we know the president is going to double down. He's looking for other ways to do this. What is the messaging, given your experience going forward? Like, how do you, I guess, win over public opinion if that's what you're getting from a poll?
I think yesterday's visit to Rome, Georgia was an important step in the messaging. Unfortunately, this case came a day after that visit. They spoke to actual people who are being impacted positively from the tariffs. You had steel workers, you had manufacturing workers that said, President Trump, thank you. You are now turning what was a one-day-a-week business into a 7-days-a-week business, really helping us here in Georgia. You have countless other examples across the country, especially in the Rust Belt and in the Sun Belt. So the reality is the American people were starting to understand what the tariffs are doing. They were seeing the revenues come in. There's been a lot of doom and gloom. I think the administration, I know when I was there, we hoped for the best, but we certainly were preparing for the worst. We were prepared for this day. And the good news is the president does have a lot of tools in his toolbox. Section 232, Section 301, Section 122, and Section 338, all a part of tariff acts. Congress has given the power to the president. So he's going to have to maneuver a little bit. Tariffs aren't going anywhere.
It does seem like he's threatening to use tariffs less against countries. Maybe that's because he's struck some deals. But a lot of countries had seen those types of threats, and eventually his bargaining and leverage, he kept delaying them, and so they would say, hey, do we really have to take this seriously?
And I think they did. They eventually came to the table. You see the amount of deals, and the deals that have already been set in stone, signed, handshake agreements, most of these are going to stay in place as well. It's just the IEPA tariffs.
Ashley, what do you think it's going to be like in terms of next week when President Trump delivers the State of the Union and there's going to be the justices sitting right there? I mean, is he going to be able to help himself not to go here?
Yeah, I don't think so. Knowing President Trump, I don't think it's going to be any softball to them, I would say. And so I think that, along with Iran, I know that's a completely different topic, but those are kind of the lingering things that a lot of people want to know
You're
about.
right. Well, one of the things that the president brought up today was the fact that he cited the use of tariffs to end war. wars. I think he also talked about being able to give the country national security through that. I guess maybe that was part of some of the stuff that Justice Thomas was writing about in his dissent.
Right, exactly. Well, I think that's how you can use it on a national security front. Of course, I think a good tariff is one that you can leverage and do it so quickly. And of course, we've seen some of these last for longer than that. But I do think that there was deals being made behind the scenes. That's kind of, I go back to, Senate procedure, which is more my area. But, that's kind of what the talking filibuster is. It provides more time for things to happen, to make deals to be made behind the scenes. And that's kind of how I see the tariffs.
Do you think that that Congress will do anything with this? Because I know that was kind of like a push that Justice Gorsuch said, if you don't like this, Congress could do something.
Right.
But I've already heard, I think Schumer came out and said he shut that down.
Yeah, I don't think the Democrats are going to want to side with the Trump administration. I think we all know that at this point. But even some GOP reps have come out saying, we don't love tariffs at this point. And I mean, I think they're kind of siding with constituents in that way in some areas. Say that 60% of people not liking it, I think it goes back to that. But, I don't think you can really rely on Congress to do much these days. And I'm just being honest there.
One of my favorite points that was made, I think he made it during oral arguments, was Justice Gorsuch. Foldy, I'm going to come to you on this. One of the things he mentioned was the idea that those that are upset, it was almost like he was talking to President Trump, like those that are upset with this ruling right now, you might like it, say if there's a Democrat president. Well, he could cite climate change as an emergency and put a tariff on gas-powered cars. That was the
honestly,
example he gave.
It is a great point. This was a loss for Trump legally for today, but I think that this was a win for Leonard Leo, who helped pick a lot of these justices, including several who sided against Trump. And this is going to be a win in some ways, even if people don't like it today. This will be a win when President AOC comes in and says that, we need to ban cars because there's a climate emergency, and Greta Thunberg has shifted back from being a Palestinian terrorist to being an eco-terrorist, and, greenhouse gas emissions are going to kill all of us, so you can't drive to work anymore. So it's a complicated decision. There's a lot to like and a lot to dislike on both sides.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.